many of you have read the book Dying to Be Me by Anita Moorjani? 2, 3, 4. I would recommend reading it. It's a pretty incredible story. But I was thinking about today's message, and I happened to stumble upon an interview that was done with her it was prior to that book coming out. It was ready for publication and was about to be released. She has since been on, the speaker circuit and Oprah and all that kind of thing, and having that type of exposure kind of waters things down, or it changes things. I don't know, it commercializes, I guess, stories, but this interview was kind of at a pristine moment in her experience. But she lives in Hong Kong, and I think her background is Indian. She's came from a traditional Indian family where there are things like arranged marriages and things she did not want to get involved in her adult life necessarily. But she developed cancer. She lived a lot of her life in fear of cancer. She had friends that died of cancer. She just everything about it apparently was attractive to her out of fear. She would read all the latest research and everything about it, but watched one close friend in particular go through cancer treatment, and she decided when she found she had it that she didn't want to undergo any treatment because she saw how brutal that could be. So she ended up pretty much staying at home trying to deal with this, and ended up with stage 4 lymphomic cancer. And by the time she was admitted to the hospital, she was pretty much beyond hope. The doctors gave her 36 hours to live. They did all these scans and things and saw that her lymph nodes, that the cancer tumors throughout her body, she said, were the size of lemons. Just no hope at all for her to live. And so she went into a coma, and she started having this incredible experience. One of the first things she did was she met her father, who had been deceased for 10 years, and where she had a very strained relationship with him in life. She said when she met him this time that he was extremely loving, just pure unconditional love. Sometimes fathers aren't so unconditional, and so she had a strained relationship with him before, but this time it was a totally different experience. She was able to hear what the doctors were talking about, hear what her husband was saying down the hallway in the hospital, and just describing the fact that she just should be getting all of her affairs in order because she wouldn't be coming back. But in her conversation with her father, who was apparently a type of spiritual guide for her in that situation, I do recommend that you read the book, or go online and just search her name, because you'll find all kinds of interviews with her telling her story. It's very incredible. But to make a long story short, she realized, she came to a point in her near-death experience where her father told her that he said, it's not your time to go on, but you can go back. You can go back, or you can go on if you want. Either way, but there's more for you. It's not your time to keep going, but you've got the choice, and the choice is up to you. And she said, I can't go back because my body won't handle it. My body's gone. And I think her father, or she knew somehow, that the body would be okay. And it was not something that she could believe very well at the time, knowing all that she knew. But she said one of the reasons that she developed the cancer was because she lived a life of fear. And it was not necessarily fear of cancer. It was fear of not being pleasing to other people. It was fear of, if she was true to herself, she would offend others. And so she lived most of her life for other people, and that was one of the greatest revelations that she had when she was having this experience. And so she committed to coming back, and she knew, well, she said that if she made the decision to come back, that all of the tests from the hospital would show positive, like her body would heal. And if she made the decision to not come back, if she did come back at all the tests in the hospital would be negative. Don't ask me how that works. She doesn't know. She has no explanation for it. But she came back, and within about 4 days, the tumors had shrank to about 65%, or by 65% of their original scan size, I guess. And within a very short period of time, she did undergo some chemo, but under a very short period of time, she was completely free of cancer. And now she's, speaking all over the world. But the thing that struck me was where she was stuck, and what led up to that death, that point of dying. And that was the fear of offending other people, trying to please other people and being afraid you can't do it. So she came back with this attitude that, I'm here because there's only me, there's only one me. And I want to give something, I want to be something special, not in an egotistical way, in any way whatsoever. But if you look at her life, just as the example that she is, she was this unknown person that was dying. When she was admitted to the hospital, one of the doctors that checked her in said, "We don't take people like this. Why doesn't she do this at home? She can finish herself off at home, without putting us through the expense." A real positive message. And Anita actually said she heard this while she was in this coma, confronted the doctor with it later. But she came back with a whole different attitude, that I'm not here to live for other people. And she said, I thought that first was a very selfish thing to think about, a very selfish thing to be, is self-centered. But if you think of it self-centered, not with a small s, but with a large S, the spiritual self, the soul, you become soul-centered. You become, what am I? And what am I here to do? Jesus said, let your light shine. What is your light? And that's what struck me. That's what she got. And it took a pretty horrific experience for her to get to that point. But as she came back and as she began to kind of rethink her life and rethink where she was coming from, she agreed to be true to herself. So she hit rock bottom. She got about as low as anyone can get, and that's pretty much dead. Not in this body. She explained to several of the doctors some of the procedures that she witnessed and heard, while she was out of her body, and they couldn't comprehend what she was saying, that she was in this coma. So there's no way that she could have picked all that up, and that's medical science. It says when your brain's gone, you're gone. When your heart stops, you're dead. But she didn't know why people were fussing over her, while they were having making a big deal out of her, trying to bring her back from what? She was perfectly fine, she said. And most of them do say that. But I like that story. I'm glad I listened to it again. I'm glad I heard her say it again, because it reminded me of several things. I read the book several years ago, and it was an inspiration to me back then. But we reach points in our life where we feel like maybe nothing's working right. Everything's closing in around us. We feel like we're stuck. We're in a rut. And I think what she experienced in a very extreme way, there's a principle there that applies to every one of us. That when we get out there someplace, we're trying to probably please others. We're trying to be something maybe that we're not really. And so the call is to get back to our center, to get back to our who we are. And we may have a little bit of a difficulty doing that. And to just hear someone like me say this is not enough of an incentive to do it. Sometimes we have to have a crisis in order to get our attention. Otherwise, we just keep plodding along in the same rut, in the same mindset. But the feeling of being stuck in life is probably one of the most common expressions of frustration, and the likely reason Henry David Thoreau wrote this famous line: "Most men lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with the song still in them." We've all heard that quote, I'm sure, read it. And I don't know if it's true that most men or most people lead lives of quiet desperation, but I would imagine most of us are familiar with that state, that we've all been there. We can all relate to that. And maybe we've had a major crisis where it looked like this is the end. You know, the end is near, as the guy with the sign picketing up and down, the end is near. And that's not a bad thing, necessarily. Sometimes it takes absolute misery to get our attention. Sometimes it takes absolute pain. And that's not a requirement. You know, that's a very important point. There are people that think that suffering is a virtue. You've got to suffer in order to accomplish anything. What suffering does, it knocks you out of your standard thought, standard emotion, standard worldview. It takes you to a place that maybe you don't know how to function. You don't know how to be there. You don't know how to respond. And that's not a bad thing. It's not easy. It's often painful. It's often terrifying. But that's the place that we have to go, and we don't have to go there by force or by violence or by crisis necessarily. But it's the whole resurrection thing. You know, Jesus went out, he taught, he was carried on his career for 3 years, 3+ years. And then he met this crisis, this major crisis. People that were cheering him on suddenly became his enemy. They became people that said, I don't know who this guy is. Never seen him before. And I've had that experience. I'm sure you have too, in some ways. And it's a place where you're pretty much alone. You stand alone. And it's a painful place. And you wonder why you're there. You wonder what you did to bring that on, to be in this place of uncertainty. And the answer is probably that you were being true to yourself. And everybody cheered you on as long as they understood what you're talking about. But then when you go into a deeper level of that, as Jesus did, because one of the things that changed in Jesus' career was he would look at the religious professionals and say, you guys, this is a scam. You're running a scam here. And you're causing all these people to do all these things that you wouldn't do yourself. And if they don't do it, you'll throw them out. You'll throw them out of the circle of love. He started challenging things like that. He started breaking the rules. He started saying things they didn't want to hear. But he never stopped being true to himself. He carried that through, and he came to a point in his life where being true to himself was offensive to everybody else. When we look at it today, we can't imagine how could that be offensive. How could Jesus being true to himself be offensive to anyone? But he was coming up against a religious industry that had everything to lose if it were discovered that he was correct. And they didn't want to hear that. It'd be like if somebody actually came up with a cure for cancer. There may be some people that don't want to hear that because cancer is such a big industry. If there was someone that came up with the ability to keep us alive forever, if there was somebody that came up with the ability to stop war, to heal us all, to eliminate crime, think of the billions of dollars that are spent in those directions and all the people that would put out of work. We never really think of it from that perspective. But when somebody comes along that starts offering cures, starts offering answers that go against the institutionalized responses that are out there, it starts upsetting a lot of apple carts. And so the easiest thing to do is nail that guy to a cross. Get rid of him. And then what grows up after that is probably so unlike what he taught that it would be unrecognizable. It's more institutionalized. It fits more into what the institution would expect. So if we are being true to ourselves, in the very deepest sense, there may be some control issues going on in our lives that make that difficult. There may be some things going on that make that difficult. I really kind of feel for the youth today that's growing up with the cell phone and the computer and Facebook and all that junk that's out there, that we think that if we've got 1,000 friends, we've got 1,000 friends. You might have one, but you've just got something to brag about. You don't have anything of substance. Media, the social media is not reality. And I pity the children that believe it is, because they're going to be in for a crisis in their life at some point that they're not going to know how to deal with. You can't Google it. There's no answer. But our coming here, we step into a society that is full of these kinds of things. I think we're in an extreme time at this point, where we have invented this thing we think is a reality, and it's not a reality at all. I was talking to a friend that was in one of the first churches I had on Facebook, and was acting like, I'm so busy, I've got so many friends, I've got so many things to respond to, and I'm just thinking, I've been through that. I was running a blog, I had over 1,000 hits in one day. That was, people from all over the world were responding to me. And it's like you get this thing built up, and then one day it just goes away. There's nothing there. It's not reality. So we build up this personality that fits into that and that makes that work, and we think that's us. And so anything that upsets that, well, I've got to change and adjust so I can keep that going. That's how so many of us approach our life. Jesus didn't do that. He didn't sell out. He didn't give himself, didn't give in to that kind of pressure. If I don't change, they're going to kill me. He let them do that. He let them take his life. And I don't think we have to go to that extreme. But when we do go to that extreme and we're to the point where we don't know what to do in life, that is essentially what's happening. We've been going down the road in a certain way, and suddenly it's not working for whatever reason. Maybe it worked before, now it's not. So what do? We start chasing the market. We start trying to figure out what's going to work so they'll like me again. That's what Anita was saying. That's kind of how she lived her life up to that point. So she got to the point where she lost it all, and she saw clearer than she'd ever seen before. And she realized, I'm not here to do that. That's not why I came here. That's not why I'm here. And she's one of the ones that I like in terms of her, why are we here? We're not here to learn. We're here because we want to be here. That's kind of her message too. So I'm kind of a kindred spirit with her. We're not here because the soul is immature and it has things to learn. That's kind of that adjust as you go kind of thing. Let me fit in. Let me figure out how to fit in here. It must be a soul lesson. The soul lesson may not let you fit in. You may not go along with that. I've been involved in groups. Beth and I bought a little sailboat some years ago, and we got involved in a sailing group, and immediately discovered how political it was, and nearly every group I've ever been involved in has got politics. So we had a regatta one day. It was a race, and there was all kinds of stuff going on, and I thought, I like sailing. I like the experience of sailing. I do not like the experience of politics. It makes no sense. What does that have to do with anything? So sometimes we have to reevaluate. We have to step out of things like that. We have to die to the path we're on. And that's the name of her book, Dying to Be Me. The title makes perfect sense when you hear her story. She had to die to be her. She had to die to find herself. And that's exactly what Jesus said. You got to be born again. And the grain of wheat has to fall into the ground and die in order to be born again. So the rut is actually, it's a very positive thing. When you're in crisis in your life, that is a very positive thing. You're being called to come back to something you've forgotten, something that caused you to step upon the path that you're on at this moment. And somehow you've gotten entangled in whatever your circumstances are, and you've forgotten why you came. You've forgotten why you stepped on this path. We like action. We like to initiate changes, see results, and go on to the next thing with the feeling that our life is progressing. Sometimes we initiate changes and nothing happens, or everything seems to go wrong. Nothing seems to work. We feel we've lost our way. We try to avoid these kinds of places. And sometimes they are the very best thing that can happen to us. I've said before that a minister friend of mine early in my career said, if you pray for a prosperity challenge, if you pray to understand prosperity, you may get a prosperity challenge. And I thought the object of praying for prosperity was to get prosperity, not to get a challenge. But his thinking was, if you really want to learn the essence of something, you get down into the nitty-gritty of it. You maybe have everything taken away from you. What is prosperity? If you want to know what life is, maybe you have to experience death. On some level, it's like maybe success should be predicated with a string of failures. So you truly understand what success is, because you talk to people sometimes who have a lot of things. They are considered successful and they are completely unhappy. But they can't back out of that. They don't know how to back out of that and get in touch with what drove them into that success, or what drove them to do whatever they had to do. And I'm not by any means saying that prosperity or success on any level is a bad thing. It's not. But you look at your own experience. What are you going through? What are you feeling? Are you in a rut right now? Did your life work at one time and it's not doing so well at this point? Is that a bad thing? And the answer, of course, is no. It's not. It just hurts. We don't like it. It's messy. It doesn't feel good. And so we try to find things that make us feel good. What makes us feel good is to get back to the us, the me that's doing the feeling, the original me that is here. If all this were stripped away, what's left? That's what I want to get back to. That's what I pull myself back to, dying to be me. It's an awareness of a level of myself that is not responding to the world in a way that's pleasing to them. It's not a selfish thing to listen to yourself, to be true to yourself, to put yourself first in terms of finding your healing, finding your balance. If you're not whole, what could you possibly give? Why give out of your incompleteness when you can give out of your wholeness? Your wholeness may not be pleasing to everybody. Not everybody will agree. I've had people tell me that I was an agent of Satan because of my belief system. I've had people just walk away because they don't understand what I'm talking about. And that's okay. As I said on a blog a couple of days ago, that there are people that defend their opinion by calling it my truth. This is my truth. But is it the truth? How many truths are there? There's 7.6 billion people. 7.6 billion my truths. Which one is true? For you. It's your connection with God. And I think when Jesus said, follow me, I think that's what he was talking about. Be true to yourself. Find that spiritual center, that spiritual dynamic that yearns for greater freedom. And get in touch with that. If you're involved in something now that is you don't understand, it's painful, it's challenging, it's pushing all your buttons, give thanks for that. And say that is causing you to reflect, to get back to what is true at the very deepest level. Because that's all that matters. It doesn't matter how happy you make somebody else. It doesn't matter how well you please others. If you yourself are suffering, there's something wrong with that picture. And that is so often how it is. I've known people that have lived a life of pleasing others and are living a very stressful existence. There's a big smile on their face. But it is hard to make all the world happy, to make all the world agree. What good does it do if you gain the whole world but lose your soul? That's the genius of Jesus. And that's what we do, is we forfeit ourselves. We forfeit that deeper level. Anita Moorjani forfeited her very life trying to be pleasing to others. That was a real issue with her father wanting the arranged marriage. He had it all figured out for her, and she did not want to do it. And the family rejected her. The family, it was a very shameful thing to say no to that tradition. But she just couldn't go through with it. It was all arranged and everything, and it was, that would have to be a difficult thing. But we all have those kinds of things. Not like that, but something like that. Something that, if we don't agree with it, we're going against something that will offend somebody. And that may all be going on in ourselves. We have these expectations for what we ought to be, and we're not that yet. But we're trying to be that. We're trying to be positive. We're trying to put a smile on our faces. Trying to look successful. And the whole time we're paddling like crazy on the inside. It's a matter of being honest, and it's not an easy thing to do sometimes. You think, well, why would it be hard to be honest? That's not a question I can answer. If it isn't hard to be honest, you are already honest. But if you're struggling on the inside, and only you know if you are, then there's something going on. It needs to be looked at. So sometimes we initiate changes, nothing happens, or everything seems to go wrong, nothing seems to work, and we feel we've lost our way. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. If you think of these words arising from your own spiritual center, you get an idea of why they can help you in your time of uncertainty. That's what Anita did, is she came back to her I am, her center. And I don't know that she talks about, when she strayed away from that. But we come to this planet, I believe, absolutely whole, absolutely healthy, absolutely complete. Our body may be a wreck. We may be born into a body that is challenged in some way. But we as a soul are whole and we are complete. If we buy into the idea that we're not complete, that the world gives us, which it does immediately, because it immediately says you've got to be filled with information, you've got to be filled with experience, you've got to make money, you've got to get a career, you've got to get married, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, to be whole. We buy into that, and then we get on this treadmill, and we don't know how to get off of it because we're surrounded by examples of that, people following that. So Jesus is kind of saying, reel yourself back in and listen. Take time. Take time to listen to your true self, to what your heart is really saying. Think of the words as that I am the way, the truth, and the life. Your soul is saying that. I am the way, the truth, and life. I'm the thing you're looking for. I'm the very thing you're looking for. It's not in that relationship. It's not on Facebook. You know, these things may be good. They may bring something to our lives. And I really have nothing against social media. What I have is, the problem I see is the people that worship at that altar, that has become their life. And I just think we're seeing a whole generation that is losing their mind over this stuff, losing their character, losing their very essence. And I think one of the best businesses to get into at this stage probably would be mental health, because there's going to be a great big bunch of people that need help. That and drugs. If you give drugs that make people feel good, you'll be rich. Think of your own spiritual center as the axle that holds the spinning wheel of your external life. At your center, you're always at rest, regardless of how fast or how slow your life seems to be moving. And that again is unity. Was adamant in the early years about the silence, getting back to your center, getting back to the silence, capital S, that place within yourself where you know you're one with God. It's like tear down all the stuff around it, let it go, and get back to the silence. Get back to the center, the soul. Stop trying to be something you're not. Don't even worry about that. Just get back to the center and you'll see how to stop being something you're not. But you've got to see the real first. And that's the important thing. And we never lose sight of that. It just seems like we're in a far country sometimes, like it's a long way off, and we are. But home is never moved. It never goes anyplace. It's the goalposts never change. That spiritual center is always there, and we can always get back to it if we take time to do that, to reestablish ourselves, our consciousness, our awareness, where our power is not in things. We let that all go, and we find our center of power in ourselves. And that's when we become powerful. That's when we have died to be me. Gotten to that place where it's okay, and this is my job. This is my life, to be me. To be who I am at the deepest level. So we surrender and trust to that all-knowing, all-loving presence of God within. Right where you are, open yourself to knowing that every step you take is the right step. That you are now being guided and protected in ways that will soon be perfectly clear. And if your life is taking a nosedive right now, consider that part of it. Instead of saying, get this out of here, start asking, who am I in the midst of this? And the answer comes. And you find your solid center of strength, and you step back into your life. Not the same person. Anita Moorjani was not the same person when she went through this transition, this moment. She walked into another room, in essence. And we do the same thing. So I would highly recommend plugging into her on YouTube or get the book, It's a very inspirational work if you haven't read it. All right, thanks for coming out, and we'll see you next week.